being here. There's a little more people than you can see on the camera, but I can't push it more backwards, so we have to do with this.
Hi to everyone. 360.
And when you're ready to start.
Absolutely, I'm happy to. Let's jump into that. I'm sharing my screen in a moment. Please confirm if you can see my Berci.
Not yet? Now it's coming.
All right. So, welcome to this session. And again, thank you so much for the chance. Digital health is very close to my heart. And as a geek myself, living with technologies in my entire life, I would love to advocate for technologies, but I'm also, as a doctor, I'm for the human touch. Therefore, I would love this session to focus on the intersection between the two. And I can't wait to get challenged and to have a vibrant discussion with you about whether the cultural or the technological component is more important in this, and how we can apply all these to the changing roles of stakeholders, especially patients and physicians in the future. And again, how we can use all this in medical education. Medical education is maybe the topic that's closest to my heart. For the last 10 years, I've been teaching medical students, and I can't tell you how much effort I've been putting into finding new ways of reaching them. I have a Facebook challenge for them where they can compete against each other in a leaderboard for skipping the exam at the end of the semester. I created online courses for them. So we need to step our game up to meet the new expectations of students of the 21st century. So in this very condensed short talk, I'm going to try to lay out a few thoughts and philosophies about digital health. And again, I can't wait to start the discussion with you about all these. The basic point that I want to make is about the implicit contract that was made between society and medical professionals in the 19th century. Society claimed that we would finance healthcare and we would always respect the autonomy of physicians. In exchange, physicians would guard over the health of patients. And that has been going on, more or less well. But a few things have changed in the 21st century. First, healthcare is not sustainable anymore. We know it exactly. In countries with socialized medicine or with private insurance, healthcare is not sustainable anymore. That's point number one. The second is the status quo has changed, because before we had an ivory tower of medicine, and me as a professional, I could access every technology and data and information. I had a key. I let patients come in through the gate. I told them what to do, and then they left. But today there is no gate, there is no key, there is no ivory tower, because patients can access everything they need, from clinical studies to clinical trials, information and technologies. So the status quo has changed too. I think I'm more of a guide in the digital jungle rather than the key holder to the ivory tower. And the third thing is we had to use obsolete technologies before. And now there are disruptive ones that are they hit our face many times a day. And before we needed time to get accustomed to one technology, now these are just pouring into the system of healthcare. So healthcare is not yet in the 21st century, and it's time to bring it there. And before, when we had personal computers finally, then e-health emerged in the early 1990s. When these computers got into a network of computers, then telemedicine emerged, and we could provide remote care, in more or less good quality. Then when social media became mainstream in the early 21st century, Medicine 2.0 and Health 2.0 appeared. Later on, when the smartphone revolution went through, since 2007 with the iPhone and that Android smartphones, then mobile health became a big thing. All of these changes were initiated because of technological developments, but none of these could really lead to a cultural change, a transformation in healthcare. And we think at the Medical Futurist Institute, we do research about how digital health is changing the future. And we firmly believe that digital health is this cultural transformation. That's the first technology-driven change in healthcare that is leading to the roles of stakeholders changing in every aspect. Physicians need to come down from the ivory tower because they cannot share all the burden of responsibility and decision-making and they cannot know everything when there are 27 million medical papers on PubMed.com. But patients need to step up to be proactive about health and disease management. And then policymakers, decision makers, researchers, developers, companies need to be in the forefront of innovation to bring all the best tools. So then in this equal level partnership between patients and physicians, we can get the best out of technologies. And I think that's the best way. I hope that you can see the image right now. That's the best way I can summarize the difference between traditional healthcare and digital health. Before, we had one professional accessing everything, making decisions, being swamped in information, and patients being frustrated about being isolated, not getting access to information, and someone else making decisions over their shoulders. Now, what's different is, as you can see, patients and physicians are equal partners. They bring data to the table, which they can analyze together, and they act together. They make decisions together because they are collaborating about a treatment or a health management or a prevention. And it's a huge difference. And I think one of the driving forces behind all this is how digital health is driving this. And I hate, so that's the first time I put words on my slides ever, but that's the best way I can show you the basics of digital health. And I just try to emphasize 4 parts in this definition that we published in the journal mHealth this September, that this is a cultural transformation that provides digital and objective data. It leads to an equal level partnership. And finally, it creates the democratization of care. That's the whole essence of digital health. As you can see, disruptive technologies play an important role in it. And just a very short story about why it's so crucial, why it's so hard to implement disruption into healthcare today. When 200 years ago, we listened to cardiac and lung sounds just like this, and the French physician Laennec came up with the idea of the first stethoscope, a wooden tube, a gadget. It took him 30 years to get the message across because physicians worldwide didn't want to use the gadget. And the wooden tube was meant to be a gadget. And of course, it changed. We accepted the stethoscope as the most important tool in the hands of physicians, but it took decades or even 100 years to get there. And now there are digital stethoscopes that can be really accurate and efficient and even cheaper than any stethoscope, analog stethoscope before them. So this is great. This is disruption and we love it. But the point is, before we had decades for accepting one technological revolution, now dozens of them come at our face every day or so. And no curriculum is preparing physicians for what's coming next, except at Semmelweis Medical School, where we teach it, how to get ready, how to get the futurist mindset as a medical professional. So this is one driving force behind digital health. The second is the software revolution, that when the IBM computer could beat the reigning world chess champion Garry Kasparov in the 1990s, that was a big step forward, but that was just one task at which a computer became better than a human person. And when IBM started using that in the cloud and in oncology centers, even now after 3 years of using that, it's still not efficient enough. But finally, something tries to bring all the information that we need to make the most informed decisions as a physician. And then there was a big step forward last year when the Google algorithm could beat the world's one of the best players in the Chinese chess game called Go, which is a very special game where intuition and creativity and problem-solving skills are also important besides computing power. And when that happened, that was a huge thing forward because now we can use cognitive computers to help us analyze big data sets and get the most out of them. That's the only way to go forward. That alone, as human beings, we are not enough to practice medicine at its best. But I don't think that technologies can replace what we do today. I think that I don't think artificial intelligence will replace physicians, but those physicians who use artificial intelligence will certainly replace those who don't. That's how simple it is. So we need to step our game up to work on those skills that make us exceptional human beings and use the best technology out there to get the most out of them. And for this, we need to change. Patients, physicians, all stakeholders need to change. And the third driving force behind digital health is this, that disruption is only disruptive if it makes healthcare available to anyone, no matter where they come from, how much money they have, in what system they belong to. It needs to democratize care. If it's too expensive, it's not disruptive enough. So when care becomes available, even in underdeveloped regions with medical drones and StarTech tricorders like the Chinese Check Me device, 3D printers and 3D printed casts and telemedicine, that's where healthcare is starting becoming really disruptive and ready for the 21st century. So to summarize it, that's the best way I can put it. Patients need to become the point of care. Today, the point of care is still hospitals and practices and medical institutions. I have to be the point of care to receive diagnosis and treatment wherever I am, because I can use devices and information to get the most out of the situation. And the last thing I want to emphasize here, and that might be a hard thing to come up with, but that's a book written by Thomas Kuhn, who wrote about the structure of scientific revolutions. And I'm mentioning this because we need to acknowledge that digital health is not just, dancing into healthcare so easily. It's going to be a war. The way Thomas Kuhn described scientific revolutions is he said that science is not progressing through a pyramid, that, we are improving with knowledge and we are getting to the top. No. Science is progressing through circles. At first, we have a normal scientific model that we have today. Evidence-based medicine is great and it's very modern and it helps people live healthier and longer lives. But with new technologies, there will be a model drift, that we need to use artificial intelligence algorithms, we need to use disruptive technologies, and a model crisis is taking place today. That evidence-based medicine is great, but we cannot expect physicians to look through millions of medical papers. So we need to use technologies that we are not ready for. And after the model crisis, there is a model revolution, when the new model that uses evidence-based medicine but builds upon disruptive innovations gets mainstream. Then we have a paradigm change, a paradigm shift, and that's the normal science that we will call digital health quite soon. And this is a war. This is very hard to push this through the system, to make regulators be ready to regulate everything as fast as possible, but still keep products safe. It's very hard to persuade patients to be proactive when for thousands of years they were meant to be silent and not proactive at all. And it's really hard to persuade physicians to get down from the ivory tower when they are educated to become the semi-gods for patients. And this is why this is a cultural change, because people will change slower than how technologies can get advanced. Great microchips will come out next year, I guarantee you that. 3D printing will become cheaper and health sensors will come to our homes, but we are just not ready for this. That's why we need to focus on the human component of the revolution. So for the last 1 minute or so, at the Medical Futurist Institute, we think that there are 4 major things we have to focus on. The first is help people embrace disruption by translating big technologies to practical terms. What it means in my life when I can use a virtual reality device while staying at the hospital to feel better. What it means as a physician to use artificial intelligence when making a decision myself. Number 2, we have to empower patients to become the leaders of healthcare, because they need to be in the focus, the spotlight. Number 3, we need to shift from treatment to prevention, and we have to persuade pharma companies that they have a similarly big business model or business opportunity in prevention, but it's always cheaper to prevent than to treat. And the last thing is we need to digitize everything in healthcare. And my favorite example comes from Netherlands. There's a company called zorgpubliek.nl. I talked with them a few months ago, and they can access the 97% of digital invoices in the Dutch healthcare system. And they use the mind of IBM Watson in the cloud. And what they do is they can let individual physicians or practices know that they keep making the same mistakes with their patients. And they can tell them that don't make the same mistake again. We can help you get better just by, creating a mission control of healthcare data. And that's brilliant. That's how policymakers and decision makers have to get the most out of digital health. And that's the very last slide. I just want to emphasize why we need to work with technologies and focus on the human touch here. There was a great study a few months ago about using deep learning methods for identifying breast cancer tissues on pathological slides. And when they asked the best pathologists with decades of experience, they had a 96% success rate in identifying breast cancer on those slides. When they created a deep learning algorithm and these pathologists started teaching those algorithms to get better and better over time, the best ones could get to 92%, not that bad. But when they let the best pathologists work together with these algorithms, it was almost a 100% success rate. So that's what I believe in. A great jackpot combination of science fiction technologies and the human component. Human beings constantly improving skills that make them exceptional human beings. So we, together with disruptive technologies, can get the best out of digital health. So that's my most condensed view of digital health, and I want to go back to see you through the video. Give me a minute or so here. Okay. And I would love to hear first what you think about all these, how you see the cultural transformation. And then I have a few points it would be great to go through while talking about all these.
Well, not a question, but maybe some addition. First of all, thanks so far. It was very interesting. We've got in our country some startup called Patient Plus, and it's for shared decision making. And they use an algorithm, or the patient uses an algorithm to make up their mind when they go over to the physician and the doctor especially for orthopedic surgery. When this guy who invented this was explaining it to me, he said, what we almost forgot is to coach physicians, because it might be a possibility that the outcome of this Patient Plus is totally different from what you would do as of your profession. And I think this is adding to what you're saying. It's the integration of both the technical part as well as the physical or physician's part, and then again try to think in another way and learn to think in another way, and maybe even coach physicians in that.
That sounds amazing. Jules, just one thing. I can't see you now, and I would love to. Maybe if you could turn off and turn on the camera, that would help. So I'm talking to a still image.
Can you see us now?
Great. So thank you so much for raising the point. I tried to call it patient design that you mentioned. That since Hippocrates, we have never asked patients what they would like to do for them, how to design healthcare for them, how physicians should think and act for them. We have asked everybody, every stakeholder except patients. So that's what you described is patient design. And every hospital, every decision maker and policymaker should have this as the rule number one, that we shouldn't do anything, shouldn't design anything, a process, a facility, a technology for patients without asking them. So that's the brilliant part of patient design. You look too serious to me now. Everyone is having a very serious face. It's if we do it right, it's a very fun topic to describe, because digital health I think is the only chance for us to really change healthcare into something that puts patients in the spotlight and not us physicians, who we think that we know everything, but it's physically impossible. So we cannot. There's a question over there.
All the way in the back. Hi, Benjamin is my name. It is a fascinating topic, and it's also it tends to make people very enthusiastic, because there's so much out there already, and there has been so much out there for the past 20 years of innovations, of digital innovations, etc. Last night we had a talk about innovation, and it was defined by what Schumpeter defined it as being creative destruction. And that to me is what we need when it comes to digital innovation. We need to have that cultural transformation in which we are willing to destroy the entire system and basically rebuild it. But as we all know in this room, and I guess that's one of the main reasons why we're also quiet after a good 4 days of talking about this subject matter, that cultural transformation is just not coming about. And we, I guess all of us, we're not individually able to do that, maybe based on a network basis. So now I come to my question. Realizing that we have so much potential that is already here in the digital sphere. And realizing that we need a cultural transformation, but that we individually can't bridge that gap. What would you advise us individually, as individuals, to change? If we could change just 1, 2, maybe 3 things, so that we can start actually working towards changing the culture.
Thank you for a very good question. And if we have about 45 minutes left, I'm going to try to give a few points about this. For me, number one is really patient design. So if I'm leading a company that's creating anything for patients, from a software to an idea to a product, anything, I just can't believe we can do that without inviting patients, creating an advisory board of patients, and constantly asking for their opinions. That's what I advise to pharma companies, to hospital leaders, that you cannot really think that you can do your job without having patients on your right side advising you constantly. For me, the second is that all of us need at least one major skill, and that's called digital literacy. The way I summarize it is we need to be able to feel at home in the digital jungle. I don't mean that I'm a hacker, but I mean that I can, deal with my privacy, my private information. I can choose a technology. I can assess the quality of online resources. I feel like at home in the online world, so I think I can help patients or my end users to feel at home too. The third is, and it might sound weird or I don't know, weird. We have to learn how to trade with the future. So I don't want to persuade you to become futurists one by one, but I think trading with the future means that every single day in my job, I push myself to think about how I could trade ideas, ethical considerations, potential advantages with the future. So I give you an example. I came across a company called Applied VR. They are creating virtual reality devices, plug and play. So you get a box in the hospital, the patient puts it on, they can use it right away. They can choose whether flying over Iceland or playing a game where they have to, be physically active. It's virtual reality. It's easy to use. It's a complete package. But it kept me think about what happens when patients don't want to use them, or what if they get dizzy? What if my kid will want to play with VR more than going out and playing football like I did when I was her age? So we need to constantly think about what might come next. That's usually not part of our job. But without doing that, it's impossible to prepare. Before it was possible to prepare because we had 1 year or years to get ready for 2, 3 technological challenges. Now dozens of them come at us every day. So when I come across, it's not here. I have a toy, a crocodile toy for my kid. IBM Watson is behind the brain of the toy. So she can have a discussion with the toy. They can create stories. The toy teaches her how to count, how to speak. It's a brilliant toy, again, with the mind of IBM Watson in the cloud. It kept me thinking about what if when my kid goes to school at the age of 6, she will have some friends and she will have some AI friends. And she will think that those artificial intelligence chatbots have personalities and they have been knowing each other for years. And of course, that's a friend of hers, even though they have never met in real life because it's impossible. But she will think that's a personality. That's not how I grew up, but I'm pretty sure that's how she will grow up. So by every day trading with the future, we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones to get ready whatever is coming next. And maybe this way it's easier to prepare for ethical challenges too. Maybe these are the 3 points I can summarize my thoughts in the best way. That's a very hard question to make because myself, I'm a quantified selfer. I've been quantifying my health for 20 years. When people ask me about how to get closer to disruptive technologies, I don't tell them to learn deep learning methods or, read articles about robotics. I tell them to quantify yourself, learn how you can measure your sleep quality, how you can motivate yourself for doing more exercises, do a genetic test. So quantify yourself, because that's the best way to learn how technologies can help you individually live healthier lives. And from there, you get a picture about how it's working, so you can go, further into robotics and AI and all these. But maybe self-quantification is the best first step forward. Thank you for the question.
Hello. Thank you. You're enjoying me, and I like what you're saying. But I have a question. I heard a story about two IA machines were connected together, and they're talking in an all new language by themselves. We now could understand, but you can imagine that you don't understand it as human in the future. What do you think about that?
I heard about a story. It happened at Facebook headquarters about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And they wanted to clarify that they use deep learning methods. They gave a few programming codes to the first computer to create a communication with the other. And when they started doing stuff the people couldn't understand around them, it didn't mean that they came up with a new language. It just meant that what the computers thought was a new language was not. It was just a way of communication. But I get your point. It's absolutely scary. I mean, I'm a geek, so it's really hard to scare me with pushing me into using new technologies. Push me. I can't wait. I can't wait to have an AI assistant and do my air ticket reservations and my emails. I literally can't wait to have that in my life. But if you start thinking about the ethical issues here, after some point you realize that the reason why we will always have human touch in the spotlight is not because that's fundamentally better than any technologies. Our algorithms will even mimic empathy because that's possible to do. The reason why I believe in the human touch is because we are social beings. So even though I am really open to any kind of disruptive technologies, I still want my physician to tell me that that's going to be all right and that's the best treatment for your problems. But I want them to use the state-of-the-art technologies out there. So it's scary when on Iceland they sequenced the genomes of 40,000-ish people of population of Iceland, and now they can tell which patient might have a bigger risk for breast and ovarian cancer. And the question is whether they should tell them or not. No, is it a breach of privacy that they can live 30 years longer, or they shouldn't breach privacy and keep the information to themselves? This is scary. When I talk about, with my wife, we talked about a robotic device in our house a few days ago. We didn't write it anywhere online. We just talked about that in the house. And I started getting Facebook ads about that exact device. That's scary. That's scary. And it's hard to scare me, but when I'm scared, it means that, lay people, individual patients are horrified and terrified about all these. But the reason why is we haven't been helping them how to translate technologies into their lives. So IBM Watson is not about an algorithm telling you now your treatment options through a Facebook chatbot or messenger. That's not. It's just about giving the chance to your physician to get all the information that they need. And when we describe to patients how it works, they tell us that they want their physician to use that or any kind of deep learning algorithms. But that's the only way to help people, by translating these disruptive innovations into everyday practical terms.
Do you say by that the role of a medical professional is changing. He has to help the patients to adopt the technical possibilities, but also is a coach to help him to make decisions and to make a better life for him.
I mean, if you go now to your doctor saying that you would love to prevent diseases, so you're healthy, you're feeling fine, what shall you do? They will send you away, for good. That how can you think that you want them to spend their precious time with you who is healthy? So today's practice of medicine is not focusing on prevention. Today's physicians most of them don't have digital literacy. If a patient comes up with, I found something online, they will tell them, please don't do searches online for your symptoms. If a patient comes with a device that they, bring data to the table, they will be told that please don't do that because these things are useless, because those physicians have never used those. So none of the good behaviors from patients that the 21st century came up with are encouraged by today's physicians. It's not their fault. They have never been trained to be ready for this. I mentioned at Semmelweis Medical School, I teach medical students the futurist mindset, digital literacy, how to get ready for all these changes. And it's a struggle, not just to teach them these skills, but it took me 1 year to persuade the board of university to let me do a new course for them, because the board didn't think that such skills are important for future practices. But these physicians will face more technological challenges than medical ones in the coming years or so. And it's a struggle to prepare them, the younger generation who are digital natives, for which technologies to use and how to find a balance between human and technological. And it's hard to teach the older generation who would love to use technologies, and they know the human touch, but it's hard for them to turn the computer on. So while I would love to say that it's possible to transmit that knowledge to them, it will take so much time that it's going to be one of the slowing the brakes system that will make the shift to digital health even slower. So it's a real struggle.
Thank you.
Dankjewel. Het scheelt niet, hij is van I hear you talking a lot about IBM Watson, which makes sense, of course, because it's one of the biggest developments when it comes to data gathering and data collection and data analysis. But we might also talk about, let's say, the annual sacred thing that happens in Cupertino when Apple presents its new products, which happened last week. About a third of that presentation is dedicated fully to healthcare. We see it at Facebook, we see it at Microsoft. It's all the big companies that are now moving into the healthcare sphere. And the reason they do that, I myself work for a pharmaceutical company, so I know a bit about the concept. Money. It's about money. These companies are moving into the space because it's one of the undefined spaces of IT, of tech, of whatever it is you want to call it. That brings me to one big question. The biggest innovations when it comes to, especially the internet, when it comes to IT systems, arise when it becomes open source. But we're talking about health data. We're talking about our individual data, which we're very protective of. What are your thoughts on open source and on how to safeguard the right exponential innovation curve that we need to really move it forward?
Wow. I'm a geek. What can I tell you? Of course, I'm for open source. Everything I've been doing online, I've been doing that on the Creative Commons license. My online course is for free for everyone. So I'm for open source. Regarding the second question, I don't think I have the answer for it, but a story came to my mind, and I'm pretty sure you know this. There's a movement in the US called We Are Not Waiting. Diabetes patients found out that it's technologically possible to create a bionic pancreas for themselves at home because they don't want to die from hypoglycemia during the night. Even though their physician was right in prescribing the right dosage, they comply with the therapy, and still, because metabolically they are different, they can die from a low blood glucose level during the night without anyone making a mistake. So they found out that they can, in a do-it-yourself way, create their own bionic pancreas. And the FDA only approved the first device last summer. So before that, for years, they had been making their own devices. They purchased Raspberry Pi computers. They used the blood glucose sensor under the skin. An insulin pump was connected to that, and a smartwatch, the software on it, made decisions about when to administer the right amount of insulin based on blood glucose levels. Brilliant. Not regulated, not safe. Everything was open source. And if you do a search on Twitter for hashtag We Are Not Waiting, you will find a huge community sharing everything, the source code of their programs, the way they do it yourself, made their devices, everything is open source. As a patient, I absolutely agree with them. I would do the same. I would not wait for a slow policymaker to approve something in 6 years when I can create it for myself today. I will do that for sure. And in that open source community, I will get help and I can crowdsource information for that. I can even crowdfund the money that I need for making it happen. As the medical future is, that terrifies me. But now it means that patients will just, come up with technological solutions without any regulatory oversight. They will print out drugs at home. It's possible now. A company called FabRx is doing that already. They will create sensors and measure everything and use algorithms like IBM Watson to make the most informed decisions about, a medical treatment based on millions of medical papers. That's the next step. So while I believe in open source, I don't think the right way forward is forbidding it and sticking to the old traditional approach in healthcare. Everything should be closed and looked upon and regulated very slowly. That's not what I believe in. But I just don't think that regulatory agencies worldwide are fast enough to be able to regulate such open source systems. I wish they would be, but they are not yet. Even the FDA, that's really in the forefront of innovation with 3D printing and a patient advisory board with all these, even they are not there yet. But because of the power of patients in today's world that is without an ivory tower of medicine so they can access everything, that's the only way forward. Patients will push forward to create even bigger spaces for open source movements. And the only way forward is for regulatory agencies is to step their game up. We are trying to advocate them and help them in this, but that's going to be a real battle between the two sides. And I have no doubts that patients will win this battle. They only lose if a non-regulated technology is becoming lethal or really dangerous for them. But otherwise, they will find their own solutions.
Okay, thank you. While you've been describing your thoughts, also your thoughts have been are being described on a drawing by one of the attendees. She's making a drawing of your story, so we'll share it with you afterwards. Anyone have a question for Berci?
Thank you very much. I would like to know what you think would be the technological innovation for the next 2-3 years, and why?
So you want me to get my crystal ball here?
Yes.
And
you're the futurist, so
predict the future. That's not a fair question. You could have asked me what might be the big thing this year or 5 to 10 years, but 2-3 is the hardest because it means that it's not yet there, but could be by then, if not later. So thank you for the real challenge here. The most exciting thing that might happen by 2019 for me personally is 3D bioprinting. The company called Organovo started, they print out biomaterials, liver tissue, kidney tissue, human tissues that can function like a human organ for more than 2 months. And they want pharma companies to test the drug's toxicity on those human organs because instead of animal models, because that's a human organ, not a lab mouse. And they started working with the FDA quite closely at the end of last year, and they predicted that by the end of 2018, early 2019, the first products could be approved by the FDA. So just imagine that a 3D bioprinted tissue could be approved by the FDA. That's the one thing that I know that practically could become possible, and that's very much I look forward to. But if in 2 or 3 years we don't have approved artificial narrow intelligence, so not yet AI, but ANI, algorithms that medical professionals can use, then we are doomed. There was a great article about IBM Watson's use in oncology on statnews.com a few days ago. It's a very objective article about why IBM's tried to revolutionize healthcare and oncology and couldn't yet. Because they overhyped the technology and expectations were way too higher than they should have been, and that's a real problem with implementing new technologies in healthcare. That we have to be objective as much as possible. So, answering your question, artificial narrow intelligence should be used in medical decision making, or we are doomed. 3D bioprinting. I hope that at least one food scanner comes out by then. They have been promising us devices, but none of them is there yet. Nima can scan your food for gluten. Telspec and Scio can scan your food for ingredients. So by 2019, they should be used in action, in practice. I hope that at least there will be one nutrigenomic service, one good. So I present my DNA to them through saliva, and they can let me know what kind of metabolization I have and what kind of diet I should have. It's nonsense that I had my whole genome sequencing from home, from a couch. I ordered that. I can measure my EKG. I have all these devices here. I can measure any kind of vital sign I need right now, but I don't know what I eat today and what I should eat based on my genomic background. So maybe these are the major things I look forward to, but again, that's a very hard question to answer.
Thanks for your answer, though.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm actually an educational designer and consultant. So I just work here for 3 months. And I happen to see a lot of doctors who also in the educational system are still, getting the education just by listening and then practicing it with another, hoe zeg je dat, co-assistent? Yeah. So actually you said the digital literacy, that's really hard for the older generation, and that's something that's gonna, put everything on the brake. But what do you think is needed to overcome that? Because it sounds like we have to accept it, but I don't want to. So,
thank you for that. As the first part of your question focused on how to get digital literacy to medical professionals, I need to be a bit aggressive here. I make friends quite easily. And when I talk to professionals at medical events, and they are reluctant, as you mentioned, to learning new skills like digital literacy, then I have to tell them that in the Hippocratic Oath that we had when graduating from medical school, there was a part in that saying that lifelong learning. And there are many professions in which you don't need that. So if you don't want to improve your skills for your entire life, you might want to change a profession, from physician going to anywhere else. So regarding physicians, they need to keep on learning. That's what was in their Hippocratic Oath. Regarding patients and policymakers, it's a harder challenge. Because as you mentioned, not everyone wants to, get on the spaceship of digital. There is no train anymore, it's a spaceship now. As a long-term goal, what I have in mind is we need to give the chance to everyone to get the best treatment possible. But there will be people who will never want to use digital channels and technologies, and we need to give them that chance too. But they also have to know that this way, their life depends on more or less pure luck. And if they acknowledge that, that should be fine for all of us. But for the others, and I think that's going to be the majority, we need to find ways to transform this special skill to them. And while it sounds like an abstract expression, it's not. It's just about, if I need information, I will find the information through search engines. If I don't find the information is not online. That's how self-confident I am, because I know a few tricks and tips I've been using. I've done millions of search queries, and I'm lazy because I want to get better and better. I know what happens with my private data through, the devices that I use and that measure my vital signs. I know how it's being pulled out of their systems to third parties. I know how genetic companies that that sequence my genome are selling my DNA to third parties. But I make those decisions about my private information. I know that I don't want Google to check my physical location, so I turn it off. I don't want Google to save my browser history and search history on all my devices, so I turn it off. I know what's happening more or less in my online life, and I want to be the supervisor. So I learned a few tricks, and I made sure that I have digital literacy. When I try to transmit that to medical students, it's not as difficult as it sounds. They are doing those things, but they don't know the background information. They love using Google Maps, but they have no idea that Google has been tracking their location for years, since the day they started using Google Maps. And by just telling them this piece of information, they get on board immediately. So while the term sounds abstract, it's just about using digital communication as efficiently as we learn to use offline communication in our lives. And I think there is no difference between off and online communication at all. I hope that reflected upon your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe it's good to tell the group that a couple of years back here in Nijmegen we changed the curriculum for medical students, and you were there to present, I believe. Do you know of any other, and you're teaching yourself digital literacy, do you know of any other examples in the world that are taking these positive steps?
I do. The University of Nijmegen is one of my favorite examples, not because digital, but because the way that first day medical students are seeing patients immediately. That's the best thing you can do to a physician, to learn empathy and to get to know patients. I know about a course at University of Ottawa in Canada where they teach futuristic skills to medical students. But actually, and that's very sad news, I have been searching, but I don't know about other curriculums where they teach digital literacy or social media communication or disruptive technologies. That's why when I finish this semester's course at Semmelweis Medical School, and if the pilot of this new course is successful, I am very confident that's going to be, I will create an online course so that anyone for free can access this kind of course online globally. That would be the plan, that anyone, even if your university board is not open-minded enough, you would get a chance to learn all these skills and knowledge through your smartphone. So we just cannot wait for someone to make it happen. We need to make it happen ourselves. But those universities that introduce future physicians, medical students to patients from day one are the best ones. That's the way to teach empathy. We haven't seen patients. We didn't see patients until the second semester, and that's awful because then you become afraid of seeing patients in person, and patients can feel that because empathy is quite okay between human beings. And I didn't know that this session is just about me answering questions. I'm happy to, but I would love to hear how you see the changing roles of stakeholders, how you think patients are or should change, or how you think physicians are or are not changing, and what would be needed for that. I'd love to hear what you think about that. I know it's a Friday afternoon and it's a very serious topic, but that's a crucial part of the discussion.
I think that's the big disruption. That's the problem now. Not the technology and not the patients, but the system. And that's a culture item. And you said before that the most the most delay are the people himself, and that's not the patient in my idea. I think the patient's he has the most reason to adapt technology because it's his health. But I think that the system and the professionals are the ones who delay it. But I think the patient will win. You described more the system of that they make a pancreas alternative. I think that's just the first one, and this is a little one. I think there will become a lot of that, and then maybe there is a totally different system or no system anymore.
Thank you so much. as patients ourselves, and we will all become patients eventually. Don't have doubts about that. I'm not threatening you, just saying. Are there any disruptive technologies that you personally are afraid of, or you're not looking forward to using when it comes to your health?
The only thing is that I hope that somebody else not use my data, but all the rest I'm not so afraid of.
And don't you think that it's happening already because of the IT system?
I'm sure of that.
Okay.
But that was long before I know that was difficult.
Okay.
Because that's from old times. That's not for now. But now it's easier, and there's more data, and there's more connection between the data. But I'm sure that when I made a form in the institute for the government, they know a lot of me. I'm sure of that, and that wasn't difficult.
And let me ask you a trade with the future question here. If you had to give up a major part of your privacy towards algorithms and big data analytics to live, 10 years longer, would you do that?
Yeah, I will do it. Yes.
Okay.
Now today. I'm not a good one. I'm a geek also.
I can't hear that.
Hi, I'm Annemiek Vroom. We've met during TEDx. I'm building a bridges between patients and the health sector. I think it's quite complicated when people have your data, because I'm not able to get a mortgage on a house because the companies say, well, you will not have that because your life expectancy is perhaps not so long. We don't want to support you. And we are in a system when we can doubt if the solidarity of our system is in that way that we will have healthcare in the future when they know all my data. So I think there's an evolution in technology, and I'm very fond of it, and I'm sure we need it, and patients will win at the end. We're running a lot of interesting projects already, where patients find their own innovations which will fit, and we go with these innovations to doctors. But I'm also a little bit afraid of the solidarity of the system, and we already, one of the most, the mortgage of your house, that's an actual point at this moment.
If I can
Thank you so much for raising this. If I just have a very short comment here. I remember a survey that was made for patients who use some kind of a health tracker at home. And they were asked about if now, majority of your private information are being used by companies and technologies. And if you had to give a percentage to what part of your privacy is going to the company behind your health tracker or to Facebook or Google, most people who used health trackers thought that the biggest part of their private information go to the company developing their health tracker, but not to Facebook and Google. And that's an amazing misconception, because if now I know that all the information that go out of my private sphere, 99% of that information is on Google and Facebook. Maybe 1% is about my DNA and my vital signs and health parameters. So we tend to think that when something comes to our health, that's a bigger threat to privacy. Those companies are not even comparable to what just two companies, Google and Facebook, know about us today. And there are links where you can check what they know about you. It's devastating how many things Google and Facebook know about us. Just a thought about this, reflecting to your point.
If I could, what I'm thinking about, if I hear you, but also if I hear you, is the word transparency. I mean, we can say that, as you say, that it's perhaps less of a problem because Google and Facebook already know so much about us and nothing really happens. But it's a clear worry in almost every society that this is the future. That insurance companies will know much more about us than they do today, and that this kind of stuff will happen. But there's also such a thing as legislation that will just quite easily prohibit this, and that will make it illegal for a company to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to happen. And that's where transparency for me comes in. If we would have full transparency, then that would that would solve quite a lot of issues. This, I mean, the insurance company in question that does this would become known and quite possibly not so much loved. But it's also something else. You've been talking about digital literacy among doctors, but that's all fine and well. But the patient or the consumer has absolutely no idea of what his or her doctor actually knows. So they go to the doctor and they just depend on the education that this person has enjoyed, perhaps 5 years ago, perhaps 50 years ago, knowing nothing about what they actually know. So there too, transparency is going to be very important, and all the layers in between. It's not a question
You
of
raised
always a
so
wrong
many
answer, but-
important points. I don't even know which one to reflect on. But maybe if still keeping the trade with the future scenario in mind, can anyone come up with a dystopian scenario of digital health and insurance going berserk? I love science fiction, so I would love to, dive into that. What was the worst scenario? We have digital health, and health insurance is loving that. Like in a practical way. I wake up, I do something, and insurance is affecting that. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there are films on YouTube about that. I have a risk for heart disease, and they see I eat something what's not good for me, and my insurance policy goes up. So simple as that. That's happening now already, but then in a digital way. I want to say something about what I was saying. The problem is that when we are healthy, we said, no data. Nobody has to get my data. I'm afraid of it. They do the wrong things, etc. But when it is a benefit for me, then I say, oh, take my data. It's a benefit for me. So it's more important what's in it for you. And I'm looking back when we had farmers and we asked them, what do you want to have? They want to have stronger horses. And they get a tractor, or I don't know how Ford said that. So I say to myself, I'm now reacting the same way they were in that time. So I can be afraid. I can think, oh, what's happening to me and what I'm going to do with my data, etc. But I can also turn it around and say, hey, what can they do with the data? They can, when I get cancer, they have, by all the data, a cure for it. I can get MS, and by all the data, they have a cure for it. So you can change it around. And I'm trying not to be afraid for it, but to look to the bright side. Wait a minute, I hope not everyone will do that. We have also the critical casters between us, but that's the reason why I look at that way to it.
So you're also implying that because of financial differences, it might lead to biological ones. I mean, if I get access to technologies, then I might be able to live longer than others. You know that it has been going on. There's a study early this year, that the top 1 richest percent of Americans live 10 years longer than the bottom 1%. And it's not even about technology, it's just about the access to care. And when digital health becomes mainstream, that will extend that 10 years to 2030 and more. That's a real challenge that we face.
That's what I mean. You can be afraid from the bad things that could happen, but you can also see the good things about it. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be careful and look that nobody disadvantages my data, but I hope they advantage my data. That's good for me.
I see. Thank you so much for raising this.
Hello, this is Bernard. I have a question about the cost of healthcare in the future in relation to all the new technologies. I mean, I work at a government agency, and there, the first thing when entrepreneurs come is I have a new idea and I need some money. And first, there has to be an investment by the government, and then I will go and I will try out my innovation. So it costs us a lot of money. That's what I see. Can you say something about that in the future? I mean, what's your...
You mean regarding how we can innovate if it costs so much, and how can people without financial background but with good ideas can get them into reality. That's the major point here. First, crowdfunding has become mainstream. I know about patients in the US who crowdfunded the financials for their oncology treatments. I mean, if that's the case, that individual entrepreneurship skills can lead to better life expectancy because you can get the right amount of money for your treatment, then it's a dystopian scenario going on already. But what I see is that today there are great technologies coming out from developed regions, of course, but true innovations come out from regions where there is no money, there's a doctor shortage, there's a lack of trust towards the healthcare system, because they only have one way to innovate, to make something really disruptive. One example, I heard about augmented reality device for nurses developed by a US company. It's called Vein Scanner. Nurse puts that on, she looks at the patient's arm, and they can see the actual veins running below the skin, because that augmented reality glass helps them see the veins, so they don't have to just guess. They can go for sure. And that costs about $5,000. And in Central Africa, I heard about a group of medical students who thought that that's brilliant, but we will never have $5,000 per nurse for the glasses. So they made an iPhone application because they found out that the iPhone's camera can be used for the same. It's not the same HD quality, but it's more or less the same. And they made the application free, available globally, because they want to help people, use their just smartphone, look at the skin, and they can see the same veins by creating an app that can create a contrast with the cameras of the smartphone. That's what I call innovation. The vein scanner was a brilliant idea, but that was not disruptive. If something is big and not cheap enough, is not affordable enough, it's just not disruptive. IBM Watson is not disruptive yet because it costs millions of dollars. So it won't change healthcare. It will lead to longer life expectancy in developed regions. That's not disruptive enough. So when there is a push, because there are no resources behind someone, that's a real chance for innovation. That's why the best ideas today come from Central Africa, Southeastern Asia, sometimes from Eastern Europe, because in those regions you need to come up with something brilliant to provide basic healthcare for people. And it was not the same before because there was no chance to make those ideas products and reality. But now through crowdfunding, there is a chance. And crowdsourcing information is also possible. So that's what has changed behind making those innovations real products in those areas.
All right, Berci, we're out of time, but thanks for enlightening us on digital health, medical education. We've gone from the worst case scenario to more optimistic perspectives.
That's what you remember. Thank you so much for that.
On the future, do you have some final remarks you want to leave us with?
If I can ask you just to get one message out of this session, it's that we as human beings think that we are the solutions for every problem out there. We are we will colonize Mars, and we have been living longer and longer lives. But the things that will come at us in the coming years, and I'm not threatening you, I'm just saying that's what the research that we do about all these will give us a scale we have never seen. I mean, if robotics and genomics and digital health sensors give you such a scale, then the next step, artificial intelligence, will be the scale from this point to the moon. That's the kind of next step we'll see. So if you have doubts about AI, or if you are terrified, I get it, me too. But if we are not getting prepared proactively in whatever you do in your own professions today, if you don't start trading with the future ideas and ethical issues and potential advantages, it's not just the transition will be slower, but we will be doomed. So as you are the avengers of digital health in the Netherlands, I truly hope that you will get the most out of these changes by trading with the future and by bringing disruption to making the human touch into the spotlight and making it more essential than ever. We still have a chance for that if we prepare in time. So thank you so much for the questions and for getting me the chance to share my ideas and visions with you. And I hope to stay in touch through the online world. I live half my life in the online world, so that would be great to get connected there too. So thank you so much again.
Thank you too, Berci.